Honestly, it was just a brutal battle, one of those matches that leaves you completely mentally drained. I'm trying my best. Today wasn't pretty, but somehow we are pivoting from a 30-all tiebreak to the collapse of the Soviet system. I established a foundation in Ukraine long before you did. How does it feel to be that exposed with 24,000 people in the room and millions watching at home? Explosive report. Coco Gauff flips the script on Soros exposing the secret RICO bill that could freeze billions. You are tuned into Chatterbox, the only channel where we don't just whisper the headlines, we amplify the silence until it screams. Buckle up everyone, because the story dropping today registers a 10 on the Richter scale. We are looking at a collision of universes so bizarre, so volatile, it threatens to rip the seams of American pop culture and politics wide open. You know her as the court prodigy, the Grand Slam queen, the darling of the tennis world. But right now, Coco Gauff is swapping her racket for a judge's gavel and walking straight into the most hostile arena imaginable. The murky, high-stakes underworld of billionaire protest funding. The rumors are flying and the internet is in total meltdown mode. And the name dominating the conversation isn't another athlete, it is George Soros. Is the tennis icon actually demanding the godfather of liberal philanthropy face a RICO indictment? Are paid crowds about to be branded as organized crime? Strap in Chatterbox. Family, we are going straight down the rabbit hole. Let's roll. If cash is secretly moving mobs in the streets, Coco Gauff insists it needs to be dragged into the daylight, not swept under the rug. That is the soundbite that has the online world burning down. In a twist, absolutely, nobody predicted tennis phenom. Coco Gauff has reportedly stepped into the blinding glare of the political stage not to discuss her serve, but to demand a crackdown on the alleged dark money fueling American chaos. The latest word on the street is that Gauff is leveraging her massive platform to back a fresh, highly explosive legislative offensive. This isn't a warning shot, guys. We are talking about the RICO Act. Yeah, that RICO, the sledgehammer used to crush mob bosses, drug cartels, and crime lords. The narrative gaining steam is that billionaire backers, specifically George Soros, are cutting the checks that ignite civil unrest. And this financing demands the same scrutiny we apply to the mafia. Picture the scene. One of the planet's most adored young competitors, standing firm and declaring enough is enough. If this bill catches fire and Gauff's voice turns up the volume, we aren't just looking at cable news debates. We are looking at potential asset freezes, account seizures, and criminal indictments that could send tremors from Wall Street all the way to Washington. Okay, hold on a minute. Let's break down the actual stakes here. The Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. It sounds menacing because it is. Historically, RICO was the federal weapon that shattered the mafia's spine. It lets prosecutors hunt down the heads of a beast for crimes they ordered their soldiers to commit. It is about drawing a straight line from the foot soldier on the street to the boss in the penthouse suite. For years, heavy hitters on the right, most notably President Donald Trump, have been screaming that George Soros and his Open Society foundations deserve the RICO treatment. We have seen the bold headlines, we have seen the truth, social blasts where Trump demanded Soros face prosecution for allegedly bankrolling violent riots. But here is the curveball. It is one thing when a political enemy says it. It is a completely different universe when a cultural superstar like Coco Gauff allegedly joins the chat. If this proposal becomes law, here is the doomsday scenario for the Soros dynasty. First up, immediate asset freeze. Accounts linked to Soros that are suspected of piping cash to agitators could be locked down in a heartbeat. Second, the criminal enterprise tag. Protest movements could be legally rebranded as criminal gangs, making the money men liable for the wildest actions of a single rioter. And third discovery, the courts would rip the books wide open. Rip the books wide open. Every donation, every grant, every single wire transfer dragged into the sun, as Gauff reportedly phrases it. Fans are calling this the ultimate checkmate for transparency. They argue if you are funding people to torch buildings or shut down freeways, you shouldn't get to hide behind charity status. They claim this is a matter of national security, i.e. the and moral duty. The talk has hit a fever pitch with claims that Soros funneled a reported $7 million war chest into anti-Trump protests dubbed the No Kings movement. Conservative watchdogs like the Capital Research Center have been trailing these alleged money trails for years, mapping out what they call a complex web of grants, gifts, and middleman groups, all engineered to trigger massive street action at pivotal political moments. Just consider the optics. You have a young black woman, a champion who climbed up from humble roots in Delray Beach, Florida. Someone who has battled her own systemic hurdles and bias in a sport historically dominated by white players. Now allegedly planting her flag in a spot that pits her directly against some of the heaviest progressive forces in American politics. This story is so wild you would swear it was ripped straight from the pages of a political spy thriller. But strap in, folks, because nobody involved in this mess is going down without a serious brawl. The outrage meter has already shattered the glass, with critics and civil liberty groups screaming about government tyranny. They are shouting from the rooftops that this isn't about stopping crime, it is about strangling free speech. The warning is clear: treat donations like mob payments today and tomorrow. You silence anyone who dares to disagree with the state. Let's not forget George Soros and his Open Society crew have always claimed they back peace, not chaos. They have slammed these accusations as total fiction in the past, according to reporting by Na for Naraji. The head honcho at the foundation is already sharpening the legal knives, promising a war in the courtroom to protect their rights. Their stance is simple: we fund democracy, we back the people, and we defend the sacred First Amendment right to march in the streets. They insist that mixing up honest, charitable work for justice with organized crime isn't just a mistake. It is malicious. It is a loaded gun pointed at the heart of American freedom. And then you have the tangled history of Coco Gauff herself. Flashback to 2020 in Delray Beach, where a 16-year-old Gauff grabbed the mic at a Black Lives Matter rally. She dropped a line that still echoes today: the silence of the good people is worse than the brutality of the bad people. That clip broke the internet, showing a tennis prodigy using her star power to demand dignity and accountability for the voiceless. So how on earth did we get from there to here? Is she pulling a total 180, or is she finally drawing a blood-red line between protesting and rioting? That is the riddle keeping pundits awake. Is she selling out her roots, or is she trying to save the soul of activism from being hijacked by dark money? Social media is an absolute battlefield right now, with half the world crowning her a hero for speaking the hard truth. The other half is furious, confused, and screaming for answers. It is a full-blown civil war in the comments section. But listen closely, because some observers think Gauff is making a subtle point that everyone else is missing. Maybe she loves the protest, but she hates the price tag attached to it. She might be asking the tough question: at what point does funding a movement turn into buying a mob? When does cutting a check for a cause cross the line into rigging the game from the shadows? That is the nuance getting drowned out in the screaming match, but it might be the key to understanding Gauff's endgame. To get why this is exploding, look at the landscape. We are living through an era of massive coordinated resistance movements. We are seeing reports of giant demonstrations rising up to challenge political power, grabs everywhere. But allegations fueled by the Capital Research Center suggest those waves are being pushed by a tidal wave of cash from deep-pocketed elites. We are talking about a reported $7 million war chest allegedly fueling the anti-Trump resistance. When that kind of money hits the table, people start asking some very uncomfortable questions. Is this real grassroots anger, or is it billionaire-funded theater that is the grenade Gauff has reportedly pulled the pin on? By dropping the R-word RICO, the conversation shifts instantly from "is this ethical?" to "is this a felony?" Let's peel back the layers on this alleged money machine, because conservative watchdogs say the flow looks a little something like this. Big players like Soros cut massive checks to vague umbrella organizations and foundations. Those foundations then filter the cash down to smaller, seemingly local outfits that look grassroots on the surface. Those little guys then hire the buses, print the signs, fund the logistics, and script the media circus. The result, what looks like a spark of the people, is actually allegedly a paid-for political production. Now, the other side screams that this is just standard advocacy work 101. They point out that the right wing plays the exact same game with their think tanks and lobby groups. They argue that trying to outlaw normal political strategy just because you hate the message is straight-up authoritarian overreach. But supporters of this crackdown say, not so fast, there is a difference between funding policy and funding street brawls. They point to the burning buildings, the blocked freeways, and the violence that has erupted during these marches. If you write the check for the group that strikes the match, they argue you should be the one facing the judge for the fire. The legal experts are absolutely having a field day with this one. The legal world is absolutely on fire over this one. You have heavyweights screaming that slapping racketeering charges on protest donors is a direct assault on free speech. But the other side is pushing back hard, insisting that if you can prove a clear trail of organized crime, specifically 2 or more felonies committed by a group built for that exact purpose, then the RICO statutes apply, and your political ideology does not give you a free pass. Everyone keeps pointing back to that one massive Supreme Court precedent. Scheidler versus National Organization for Women, the landmark battle over whether these laws could crush anti-abortion demonstrations. The justices eventually ruled you need an economic motive to make it stick, which basically gave nonprofits a shield. But recent laws and messy court rulings have blurred those lines, leaving everyone unsure if today's protest funders are actually safe. Now here's where this story takes a wild turn. Insiders on Capitol Hill imply this bill isn't going to have George Soros' name on the cover. Instead, it lays a trap for any group that fits the profile, dumping massive cash into unrest, ignoring safety protocols, and coordinating chaos across state lines. The terrifying, genius or danger depending on your view, is that it hands prosecutors the power to pick their targets. The political chess move here is brutal. If this bill gains traction, it backs Democrats into a corner. Do they stand up for funding protests that might turn into riots? Do they look weak on public safety? Or do they sign a law that could be weaponized to crush their own movements later? It is a classic Kobayashi Maru and no-win nightmare that has strategists sweating bullets. And then there's the Coco Gauff factor. We need to separate hard facts from the rumor mill. Right now, nobody knows for sure how deep her involvement actually goes. You hear whispers that she is out there actively pushing for this law. Then you hear she just made a comment about transparency that got twisted by spin doctors. And then there is the theory that this is a psyop meant to split the left by pitting a Gen Z star against the establishment. The scary reality, in this digital chaos, telling the difference between a real scoop, a viral rumor, and a lie is nearly impossible for normal people. And that confusion is not an accident. When the zone is flooded with noise, people run to their corners and believe whatever feels good. If you hate dark money in politics, this story proves you right. If you fear a police state, this story proves you right. Everyone gets their validation. But here is what is actually real. Legislators are absolutely writing bills to expose who is paying for these protests. The fight over the line between free speech and criminal conspiracy is happening right now. And people are legitimately asking if billionaires should be pulling the strings of social movements. We also know Coco Gauff has been quiet on politics since her speech in 2020. She has been locked in on her tennis, her mental well-being, and setting an example for the kids watching her. Whether she's about to drop a bombshell or if her name is being stolen for clout remains the big mystery. You cannot ignore the generational clash here either. Gauff is Gen Z and they are looking at these institutions with zero trust. They do not buy the media narratives. They do not trust the parties. They do not trust the corporations. And they are side-eyeing the big nonprofits too. There is a vibe among the youth that the whole game is rigged, that everyone is a puppet master, and that real change is dead in a system run by billionaires. If Gauff is really asking who is paying the bill for these protests, she might be speaking for a whole generation of skeptics. She might be saying the quiet part out loud, that the whole system is bought and that we need to break it all down. Or darker still, she is just being used by sharks who see her fame as a weapon for their own war. American political history is a graveyard filled with the reputations of good-hearted people who unknowingly signed their names to agendas they didn't grasp, only to realize too late they were just pawns on a grandmaster's board. Let's get down to the brass tacks of the money, because the sheer volume of cash flowing through American philanthropy is mind-bending. George Soros and his Open Society foundations have pumped billions of dollars into thousands of networks across the globe for decades. Just looking at the domestic front, the OSF has been the financial backbone for civil rights movements, pushing for criminal justice overhauls, voting access battles, immigrant protection, and a laundry list of other missions. Even if that rumored $7 million for anti-Trump rallies is real, it is barely a rounding error in their massive ledger. But here's the kicker in this game. Optics crush reality every single time. If the public buys the narrative that this outrage is rented by the hour, facts cease to matter. The moral authority of the protest evaporates, which is exactly why the transparency angle hits such a raw nerve. It is not that they think every donation is evil. They are arguing that the public deserves to know if they are watching organic anger or a paid-for political stunt. The pushback naturally is that this demand for sunlight seems suspiciously one-sided. You don't see anyone threatening the Kochs or the Mercers with RICO charges for funding conservative empires. No one is dragging the donors who bankrolled the Tea Party into the spotlight to audit their receipts. Critics claim this selective outrage proves the whole thing is a sham. It is really about silencing specific ideologies while pretending to care about the rule of law. And that drags us right to the jagged edge of the real dilemma here. In a free society, where do you draw the line between the right to scream and the need for order? How do you safeguard speech without inviting anarchy? And the million-dollar question, at what point does writing a check for activism morph into funding a criminal conspiracy? These are brutal questions, and even the smartest minds in the room are split on the answers. That is why the goof angle is such a powder keg. It strips away the usual partisan armor. We can't just write her off as a right-wing agitator if she is asking questions that actually matter. We can't bury our heads in the sand just because the inquiry makes the progressive establishment sweat. And we have to stop pretending that money isn't the invisible hand shaping these movements. Then you have the international fallout to consider. Soros' empire spans dozens of nations. Look at Hungary, Poland, or Russia governments. They have already declared war on these Soros-backed groups, branding them foreign agents, plotting to topple regimes. The OSF has been kicked out, offices shuttered, operations forced to flee. Detractors call it a dictator's playbook to crush civil society. Defenders argue that no sovereign nation should let foreign billionaires bankroll their opposition. If the US starts using RICO statutes to hunt down protests, funders, we are crossing a Rubicon that changes the rules of political warfare forever. It effectively gives a thumbs up to every authoritarian regime the US has ever lectured on human rights. While the pundits scream on TV, the real showdown is heading for the courtroom. If prosecutors actually pull the trigger, expect a tidal wave of lawsuits. The ACLU is already sharpening its knives, ready to fight anything that looks like criminalizing dissent. Even conservative heavyweights like the Alliance Defending Freedom might find themselves in the bizarre spot of fighting for the other team, knowing those same weapons could be turned against them next. Imagine the discovery phase. It would be a nuclear detonation of secrets. Subpoenas flying everywhere. Every private email, strategic memo, and grant application dragged into the light. Both sides would cherry-pick the leaks to claim victory. But that flood of data would feed the conspiracy machine for the next 20 years. And right in the eye of this hurricane is Coco Gauff, a young woman who might be a whistleblower, a crusader, or just another piece on the board being moved by invisible hands. We don't have the full story yet, and that void is exactly why this is so gripping and so perilous. When the facts are missing, everyone just projects their own movie onto the screen. Listen, this isn't just a headline. It is the collision of every single American nightmare, from fears of violent political riots to shadowy foreign meddling, deep distrust of both the establishment and the mob, plus a bitter generational war over how to fight, and the desperate battle to decide what is allowed in our fractured democracy. These are the defining riddles of our time, and they are all packed into this one ticking time bomb of a story. One fact is undeniable. We have officially hit the absolute boiling point. The silence is shattered. Whether this law survives or is just a warning shot, the signal is crystal clear. The era of dark money manipulating the masses from behind the curtain is running out of time. If Coco, the icon of a new generation, is really leading this revolt, we are watching a massive cultural shift. It proves even the sports and fame elite are exhausted by the puppet masters. They want the hidden files. They demand the truth. But where do you stand? Is this a heroic push for honesty or a risky attack on free expression? Is she right to expose the funding, or is she playing with fire? Comment below. Are you Team Coco or Team Soros? Pick a side. And hey, to stay on top of the scoops, the mainstream media is too cowardly to touch. Crush that, like button subscribe and ring the bell. You absolutely do not want to sleep on the next chapter of this saga. Until then, stay vigilant and keep watching. This is Chatterbox, signing off.